Ed, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you with some F16 training for Ukrainian pilots. Why does this matter, folks? Why do these F16s matter? So if you don't know anything about aviation, these are some Polish F16s, and here's some F16s in Korea. The American Air Force has got some air power. That's more than the entire Australian Air Force in one photo right there, which is pretty insane. Why does any of this matter? Why do F-16s matter? Why does the US being part of this matter? When you look at the conflict in Ukraine, I look at it and think maybe they've just given them enough weapons just to kind of hold them off, hold them at bay. And part of the reason that this is taking such a long time is because we know that we could destroy the Russians and the Russians on the ground in the first week if we got involved with it. And even if we trained, they want 4 squadrons of them. They want 40 jets, right? That's what they said that they've needed, which is an entire air force of fighter jets that are going to be handed to them. It's like, what happens on the other side of all of this? So let me just take a second to go through some capability of F-16 and Viper and why that's so important. It is the most prolific Western fighter that's ever existed. There's more than 4,500 of them. First flight of the thing was in 1978. So it's only a year younger than me. And they have different blocks, so different variants of them. And we haven't heard what block variant that they get of them, which kind of is pretty telling. And it will tell us if they're getting really old inventory from the 1980s or they're getting really state-of-the-art equipment. So the different variants in the blocks have got to do with the radar systems and the weapon systems that they can actually carry. So don't be misled when they say that they're getting F-16s, that they're getting Block 60, Block 70 versions of them, the latest and greatest versions. They're not getting those at all. They're going to be getting some really old stuff, I predict, that has limited capability and to only just do enough to hold the Russians at bay. So the Russian Air Force will still outrange us with their beyond visual range missile systems, and they've always been able to do that. So I highly doubt that they're getting AIM 260 or Meteor missiles put onto these jets to be able to engage with the Russian Air Force at range, beyond visual range, that is. So really what we've got here is a fighter ground attack scenario that we're looking at. And is that a good thing? Yes, it's an enhanced capability, and it gives us not a long-range strike capability because the range of a Viper is pretty limited, particularly without the air-to-air refueling capability. But the thing that I want to highlight here, and here's the unspoken truth, folks, is that for every hour that a Viper flies, it requires 17 hours of maintenance. So if we're talking about 40 jets, and say each jet flies 2 hours per day, just think about the logistics that go behind that. So 17 times 2 is 34 times 40, and not every jet's flying every day. Say that you have 20 jets flying per day. That's a lot of hours in maintenance. And imagine how many people it takes to actually make that happen. How many crew chiefs does it take? How many guys turning wrenches and spanners does it take to maintain just 1 hour of that? And to actually build the capability to understand the avionics, the systems, the structure of the aircraft, there's just like literally thousands of things that you have to learn. You've got to go to school for 3 years to learn to be a mechanic on one of those things. And then when you go there for 3 years to be the mechanic, then you really don't have the capability to do very much beyond actually working directly with the people that have been there for years. Like the level of experience you need to work on something like this. If you're a car mechanic, it's no different, right? You've got to do an apprenticeship for 4 years, and you've got to go and study, probably once a week, and you've got to go through exams. And then even though you know how to do everything that you've learned in your apprenticeship, if you go to a new car dealership to go and be a mechanic and a technician at one of those places, you're starting again because I don't know anything about these vehicles. I'm going right back to the start. So the level of logistics that are behind it. So I'll say it again. For every 1 hour of flight, there's 17 hours of maintenance on the lower end to actually maintain these jets. And if you start talking about delivering jets to them that are from the 1980s and the 1990s, you're probably talking 20 to 30 hours per hour for every hour that the jet flies. So that's just one aspect of it. So they're talking about training pilots, but where are the aircraft going to be housed? In Ukraine, or are they going to live in Poland and some of the Baltic states air-to-air refuel on the way in, fence in across the border, and then fence in across the border in Ukraine and then go strike their targets? Or are they going to operate out of air bases in Ukraine? No one's talking about the details here. And if they start operating on the other side of the border in Poland, oh, it's the Ukrainian Air Force, we're operating from there. Well, the Russian Air Force operates from Belarus. Well, you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Well, you're operating from a NATO airbase. So now NATO maintenance personnel are supporting the Ukrainian pilots. Well, is that NATO being involved in this conflict? And is that going to escalate the conflict? So these are the things that nobody is asking. No one's asking these questions. For some reason, they don't understand that it takes 17 to 30 hours to maintain 1 hour of flying time. So now we talk about maintenance of it. So let me show you why the military-industrial complex is chomping at the bit to give them jets. So for every hour that a Viper flies, it's estimated to cost about $26,000 per hour. So who's paying for that? You are. America, you are. That's who's paying for it. It's an incredible amount of money per hour. So imagine these jets fly 30 hours per month each, and then you start saying that there's 40 jets that have an operational tempo of 20 to 30 hours each per month, and you're about 30 grand per hour to operate it, and then you're 17 to 30 hours per hour flying time in maintenance. How on earth are they going to manage that? You can't build an air force in a couple of weeks. That capability takes decades and decades to build that capability. Not to mention the fact that the Ukrainians have been operating Soviet aircraft for the entire existence. They don't operate Western aircraft. They just don't have them. And there was a couple of Ukrainian pilots. So there was an Su-27 pilot, so fighter pilot, and a MiG-29 pilot, again, fighter pilot, sent to the United States to do assessments for 2 weeks for training in Ukraine on Viper. And there was really 5 things that came out of it. So they said that they could create an abridged training syllabus for Ukrainian pilots. And instead of learning 250 tasks, they could lower that to 160 tasks. So one of the biggest concerns that they had, though, was these Ukrainian fellas couldn't actually speak English. So English is the universal language of aviation, and they're operating aircraft made in the United States. So they're going from the Russian system to the English system. So that's actually a really big factor for them as well. So considerations of previous experience was a big thing. They were able to handle the aircraft pretty well because it translated what they were doing. So I'm certain I couldn't find any information whether or not they actually went flying for real. What I could see was all of it was conducted in a simulator. So the simulators are real to life and full fidelity as well. So it's really not much different to actually going flying. And because they're fighter pilots already, you know, there's not much of a transition there as well. So the recommendation is to actually cut the total time of training down to about 4 months for these people. And when I look at that, something that would normally, the pipeline is normally 18 months to 2 years, and they're going to slice it down to 4 months. Are you kidding me? Really? Are you kidding me? So now put that aside. How can you possibly learn those skills and hone those skills? You know, a MiG-29 pilot or an Su-27 pilot can get in the aircraft and take off and land. I'm sure they can, because you push the throttle forward, the aircraft goes faster. You pull it back, it goes higher. Turn left, it turns left. Pull the throttle back, it'll go lower. That's it. All airplanes operate the same. All helicopters operate the same. But just because you can take off and land and you have the airmanship and the skills to actually do that, the ability to actually fight the aircraft is something that can't be trained in 4 months. You can't learn that in 4 months. It's not possible to learn something like that. And think about when you were learning to drive. We were talking about my daughter learning to drive before we hit the record button here. You can't learn to drive in 4 months. It's just not possible. You can't go from a standing start. Even if you drive every single day, you're still not competent and you're still risky, and you'll get in the car with somebody who's got experience and I'll be like, oh my God. So the capability that the Vipers give to them is unlike anything else that's out there. It's the right pick. There's no doubt about that. And my knowledge and what I know about military and hardware, particularly Air Force, it's the right pick for sure. It's the right machine. But what block is it? So what version is it? That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, where are they going to be housed? And if they're housed, imagine if they're housed in Ukraine and the Russians go after them and they fire 30 cruise missiles at them, and you bleed your air defenses dry in that airstrike, and it gets through, and 9 of those jets are destroyed. Like, what? We hit the Russian Air Force in Crimea with a drone and destroyed a series of their aircraft that were parked in the open. Ukrainians don't have hardened shelters to park F-16s in. The best that they could do is park them in the open with a revetment around them, so if one of them gets clipped, it doesn't blow up and blow up the one next to it. So there's so many things here that don't make sense. And my view is that this is an escalation beyond what you might see. But we might not even see any of this happen. Tell me what you think here, Ed, because this is the last, I'm shooting craps, man. It's the last throw of the dice here with this counterattack this summer. And if it doesn't come to pass, I predict the support for the Ukrainians might go away. And then they're going to say, look, you know, this is a moot point. You're going to have to negotiate. Bad luck. And we're just not going to support you anymore, give you any more money. Bad luck. And all of the pilot training and all of the logistics and everything that's going on with their make it up as you go Air Force will go away as well. And by the time that's all ready to go, if you've got a 4 or 5 month pipeline of training, so the British have come out with the Dutch and a couple of other countries and said, we'll form a coalition to train them. The Americans, Joe Biden today in Japan at the G7 said, yep, we're going to lead the flying training for the F-16s. So there's a coalition of people coming together, but the Americans are not going to give them the jets. The jets are going to come from the Europeans, but the Americans are going to lead the training, so to NATO standards. That's you're 5 or 6 months down the track before any fighter jet is seen in Ukraine. So 5 or 6 months down the track, counter-assault has finished. Were we successful? If we're not successful, all of that goes away. And if we are successful and those jets come, we're escalating this thing to the very next level. Like, really? This is, really?
Well, Ukraine already has a PR problem because in Europe, protests are breaking out at an accelerated rate against this war.
Yeah, people have had enough of it, hey?
You're right. People have had enough. And they've had enough of Zelensky, and they've had enough of this war. They've had enough of how this is affecting their lives. You know, the cost of everything is going up. It does, on a practical level, it's affecting the Europeans' lives. So they've got a PR problem. So it feels to me like they're trying to get as much as they can while they can. It feels like we better get something out of this as fast as we can. Zelensky is in a panic, going from country to country, going on fashion runways with his newest jumper in each country, trying to raise money for. I'm sure he's desperately trying to raise money while he can, while the governments are willing to pony up. That's what it kind of feels like to me. I remember it was last summer. Do you remember how all the NATO countries from Poland, Czechoslovakia, France, they're turning themselves into pretzels to make sure to avoid the perception that they were aiding Ukraine, right? Like particularly around jets, right?
It's because they're making themselves a target, right? So if these jets operate from Poland, what do you think the Russians are going to do?
That's right.
Operating over there.
Well,
here comes a Kinzhal missile for you. Eat that.
Yeah, right. Well, now who's providing these F-16s? You said the Poland?
No, the Polish said that they wouldn't. Poland gave them all of their MiG-29s because they replaced their MiG-29s with F-16s, and they said, we just don't have enough Vipers to give to you.
Okay, but they are giving them,
hold on to them.
But they are giving them planes.
Okay,
so NATO, apparently, they're stepping up. They seem to be not so shy anymore about overtly providing aid to Ukraine.
But you can't covertly supply these Vipers to them. So I can give you the MiG-29s because you've got supply